Do you just object to the thought of taking statins regardless of whether you get side effects from it or not? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about philosophical objections to statins and how those are actually your strongest arguments against being forced to go on to a medication you don't want to go on. Stay tuned. So to complete this discussion on statin intolerance, well, I talked about physical intolerance a couple videos ago, and in my last video I talked about the nocebo effect mostly on psychological intolerance. Well, now let's talk about what I call philosophical intolerance. There are plenty of philosophical reasons why you might not want to take statins. I came up with a list easily, about 10 or 12 of them. I've picked 6 to discuss today, and these are the types of things that you can talk to your doctor about. Some you're going to be more successful with than others, and that's why I picked this random assortment, just so you can see which arguments, all valid from my point of view, are more likely to be able to carry weight with your doctor. You may have a distaste for the idea of lifetime medications. The problem is, lifetime medications, they don't cure conditions. They only attempt to manage it. But if you go to your doctor and you say, hey doc, I don't like the idea of lifetime medications, your doctor can easily trot out an example where a lifetime medication is absolutely necessary. For example, insulin injections for type 1 diabetic. Well, for many type 1 diabetics, that is absolutely life-saving and necessary and a lifetime medication because they have a genetic problem where they can't produce insulin. However, for a type 2 diabetic, insulin injections, while maybe they'll get the blood sugar down, are actually making the problem worse because type 2 diabetes is actually insulin resistance. So if somebody is insulin resistant and you have to give them more and more insulin in order to overcome that resistance, the resistance is just going to increase. I have a relative who suffers from a condition known as cyclic vomiting syndrome. And if you've never heard of it, just parse the words and it's as unpleasant as it sounds. He has to take a lot of medications to control that, and I'm just glad those medications exist to the extent that they can and that he can control it to the extent that he can. Here's one that will cause your doctor to probably roll his or her eyes, and that is you have a distrust of Big Pharma. They have a profit motivation. They're trying to give you a drug that is going to impact your liver function, and somehow we're supposed to trust them that their profit motivation has nothing to do with whether or not this thing is dangerous. Your doctor can cite a lot of major successes, though, from the pharmaceutical industry. Polio has been wiped out in the United States, and I believe worldwide, not sure about that. Antibacterial medications for things like Lyme disease, things like various different infectious diseases are treated with antibacterials. Without the pharmaceutical industry, we would be a lot worse off. The problem is, I think they've gone too far. But if you bring a distrust of Big Pharma and their profit motivation to your doctor, like I said, will push back on that. You may find the evidence unconvincing or underwhelming. You guys can agree on what the evidence is showing you, but at the bottom line, there's a value judgment at the bottom of it. So this is how we go about it. First, know your risk calculation. Use the 2018 pooled cohort equation risk calculator. You can get it actually from a pharmaceutical company whose motivation would be to give you a higher risk than you actually have because then they can sell you more drugs. But they actually have this calculator which is known to be more accurate and will give a lower value than what your doctor is likely using. If your doctor is using the 2013 ACC-AHA calculator, then they're going to have a much higher value. As a matter of fact, you should probably find that and do both calculations so you can call them out on it when they say, well, your risk is X, and you say, no, my risk is this lower one, and this is from a newer, more accurate equation, and challenge them why they're not using that one. So once you've got your absolute risk reduction should be about 36% of that. And I always use 36% because that's what Pfizer advertised as the relative risk reduction you get from taking Lipitor. Multiply that risk by 0.36, and then you can take the reciprocal of that, the final value there, to get your number needed to treat. So for me, here's a diagram that I've shown these pie charts before. The yellow area is the probability over the next 10 years that I'm not going to have a cardiovascular event. The red and the green combined would be the probability that I am going to have a cardiovascular event over the next 10 years. In the green part of that combination is the probability that I'm actually going to avoid a cardiovascular event. Now I look at that and I say, that's not very effective. However, there was a quote in an article that I talked about in a previous video where a doctor said, those kinds of numbers In this case, they were talking about 1.7% over 4 years. In my case, I'm talking about 2.5% in 10 years, are typically what we see for very effective therapies. This is known as drinking the Kool-Aid. All right, a doctor who could actually seriously trot out that number and say, this is a very effective therapy. That little green slice, that 1 out of 34 people on this therapy and one of them benefits. That's not very effective. And I think you can make this argument and you can tell your doctor, look, we can agree to disagree, but that's not worth it to me. And in my case, that's certainly the case. This isn't worth it. It's not worth the financial cost of getting the medications. It's not worth all the adverse effects. Real or imagined, it doesn't matter at this point. That's just a ridiculously small benefit from taking this medication. You may prefer lifestyle solutions, and I think you can probably make this one stick, though your doctor's going to throw one thing at you if you've tried them. And of course, by lifestyle, we talk about diet, we talk about exercise regimen, and suppose you have tried those. You know, doctor told you, well, then do this. This is the lifestyle change you should make. And then you come back and say, hey, you know, that didn't work for you. It didn't lower your cholesterol. Well, it's a separate question whether lowering your cholesterol should be an end goal, but regardless, they always assume that it just doesn't work for you. They never ask, did we give you the right changes? Maybe you just haven't been given the right changes. You're going to have to do a little bit of research on your own and some experimentation and see what works for you. But like the diet and the exercise, they lowered my insulin resistance considerably. I went from being pre-diabetic to well below that range. So this whole idea that they didn't work for you because they're looking at your cholesterol number, maybe your cholesterol number is perfectly fine the way it is. You may want to avoid the medication treadmill. That happens when your side effects from taking one thing are treated with another pill. And the side effects of that are treated with another pill. And you can see that just keeps on going over and over again. Here's something that my wife got for me. I do take some supplements. I'm not really big into supplements, but after having been on statins for 10 years, I still take CoQ10. I take some fish oil to help the HDL, vitamin D, on the advice of my integrative medicine doctor, because in the Northeast, vitamin D deficiency is a big thing. And I happen to take a little bit of magnesium. And what I do is, this is week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So every 4 weeks, I fill this up with approximately a month's worth. That way I won't forget, because I forget all the time. I don't remember whether I took them today or not. So by having this, that takes care of that. But you notice that this was really not the purpose of this object. A lot of the things are rubbed off, but this is really supposed to be 1 week. A person's morning, getting up medications, their noontime medications, their supper time medications, and their bedtime medications. The fact that this exists, I think, is a telling reflection of the state of medical treatment. That somebody would have 28 doses of medications per week. Now, I'm not blaming you if you are actually in that situation. I feel bad for you, and maybe it's necessary, and it might be necessary for some people. If you're an otherwise healthy person and you're put on statins and you end up needing something like this to get through a week, then that's a serious failure on the part of the medical system. You may think that high cholesterol is an invented disease. Might not fly with your doctor, though I agree with you on this one. Here's what keeps on happening. The eligible, that friendly word, eligible, you're eligible to take statins. That level keeps getting lowered. At one point, when they first invented cholesterol measurements, under 300 was considered fine. And then it had to be under 260. Then it had to be under 240. And then it had to be under 220. Now, if you're at 200, you're eligible to take statins. Well, I've shown this graph before. This was from a study of, I think, 39,000 American patients. All-cause mortality is actually minimized around, that looks like 220 to me. The gray area, by the way, I've discovered is the 95% confidence interval. So it's pretty certain that you're better off with a cholesterol value over 200 than under 200. And again, there's not necessarily a cause and effect here. Just changing your cholesterol level down to the optimal point there might not be doing you any good, because you're doing it artificially, and it may be actually, your cholesterol level may be a reflection of your health as opposed to a cause of your health. Another example of the direction they're going, well, I read an article online where it was stated that a blood pressure of 120 over 80, which we've always been told, that's perfect, that's perfect blood pressure. Now it's considered pre-hypertensive. Not over 120 over 80, but 120 over 80 is considered pre-hypertensive. And I'm going to get back in a moment to why this definition may be there. So my next question is, well, right now an HbA1c value of 5.6 is considered less than pre-diabetic. It is on the edge. Sometimes I see 5.8 as the value. Sometimes I see 5.7% as the value for a pre-diabetic diagnosis. Well, what's going on here? Well, there are drugs to treat hypertension. There are drugs to bring down your HbA1c. I argue about whether that's the proper way to do it or not. Even the calculators actually argue about whether reducing your blood pressure by way of a drug is improving as much as if you did it on your own. But these are opportunities to sell us more of those maintenance drugs, those lifetime drugs. So I think we see what's going on there. Not to minimize the danger of high blood pressure or the danger of type 2 diabetes. Those things are both very bad, and they roll into your heart disease risk or your cardiovascular event risk. But I see these changes to the standards not as necessarily looking out for our best interests, but a way to sell us more drugs. Now, if these things are truly what they should be, then we should be given valid lifestyle changes, not the ones that they think according to their theory should work, but the ones that actually do work for us. So what is the fundamental problem? Well, this quote from a paper that I talked about in an earlier video, 40% to 75% of patients stop statins within 1 year. What does that mean? That means patients have rejected statins. But the medical profession sees the issue as one of patient education. They're like ignoring the fact that patients as a whole, as a group, have rejected statins. We don't want them. But they think their job, therefore, is to convince us that we do want them, rather than taking a step back and saying, what's going on here? Where have we failed our patients? And not educating them properly on the use of statins, but where have we failed our patients in trying to force this unacceptable solution to an alleged problem on them? Well, in a phrase, it's medical hubris. So that's my take on what I consider the strongest arguments you can have against taking medications that you don't want, and those are your value judgments. The strongest one of all is that the evidence is underwhelming. The others still carry weight. They might not carry weight with your doctor. They certainly carry weight with me. They should carry weight with you. So if you like this content, please like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you haven't seen this video, I recommend you take a look at it now. Thanks for listening.